start. So thank you very much for joining me this morning for today's webinar, which is the importance of continuously developing your sustainability strategy. My name is Sam Walker. I am a consultant at Action Sustainability. I have a background in social value, performance measurement and management, environmental management systems, and of course in sustainability strategy as well. Hopefully today we will have time for questions at the end, but just in case we don't, or if you're interested in anything at any point throughout the webinar, please feel free to send me an email. This is my email address here. I've also included the link to actionsustainability.com just so you can have a little look on what we do there. And specifically, if you want to find out more about sustainability strategy, I provided the link in here as well. Before we start, just a little bit of housekeeping. So I do have a mentee that's going to come up twice through the webinar. So if you could get your phone to hand, I'll have a QR code that you can point your camera at on the screen and it should take you directly to the mentee. Or if you're on a laptop, just make sure you have a spare browser that you can access for that. I will be sharing the slides later after the webinar as well. Please share your feedback at the end. It's always really useful for us to know what we've done well, what we haven't, if we've missed any content. So please do share that. And lastly, we have the Q&A function as well for the webinar today. So if you have questions, please feel free to enter them and hopefully I'll have some time at the end to get round to answering them. If not, I'll take them away and I will get back to them in the email that's sent out with your slides. Usually when I'm presenting these webinars, I'm presenting for the Supply Chain Sustainability School, but today I am presenting for Action Sustainability, which is the consultancy side of the organization. We have 3 different service offerings. We also have the sustainability tool, which is a bespoke cloud-based performance measurement tool that helps organizations measure their sustainability impact. And of course, the Supply Chain Sustainability School as well, which provides resources on loads of different sustainability related topics, sustainability strategy, of course, social value, procurement, all of these topics. And throughout the presentation that I've done today, I've linked to particular resources that you can refer to afterwards. So hopefully you can use the slides as a little bit of a directory or guidance for next steps. Just to cover what we're going to go over today, really important that we understand why continuous improvement is important when we're talking about sustainability, and in particular with sustainability strategies and how it's vital for that resilience and long-term success of our organizations. We're also going to explore some of the emerging trends that we've seen with sustainability strategies and sustainability based on the experience that we've gained from working with organizations and research as well. And we're also going to look at some of those challenges that are typically found when implementing a sustainability strategy and how you can overcome that. So there's quite a bit of content that's covered today. Some of the slides might be a bit text heavy, but as I say, I'm hoping that you can go back to it and refer to it. So if we start off with the strategy cycle, if you've been to one of my webinars or Hattie's webinars on sustainability strategy, you'll know that when we talk about how you develop and you implement a strategy, we talk about the strategy cycle. And in effect, what we're showing here is the process that you need to follow to be able to deliver and implement effectively a sustainability strategy. So in the top left, we're talking about you starting with researching, finding out what's going on in the market, with clients, with your competitors, working out how they're working with sustainability. We're then going on to identifying what the drivers are, why you want to have a sustainability strategy, why you want to be sustainable, what the impacts your organization is having on the environment, on communities. We're looking at the enablers that you have or you'll need to help you implement your sustainability strategy. We're then going to coming up with those goals and those commitments, creating an action plan, so making sure it's really clear that everyone knows who's responsible for delivering what in your sustainability strategy, and those 3rd delivery steps, which are monitoring implementation, measuring and managing and reporting on performance, and continually improvement. So ideally, at the end of that process, what we come up with is the development of a sustainability strategy. And your strategy may be presented in various different ways. I've got 2 examples here. So I've got a really good example from Waits that have a sustainability plan. And then I've got an example here by Mace in which they've presented it online and they've integrated it into their business strategy. And you can have a look at both of those after the webinar to compare and see how it's been presented. What's really important though, and I will say this a lot during the webinar, is that your sustainability strategy doesn't just sit there once you've done finished with it, once you've come up with it. You've got to keep on top of it, and it's got to continue to reflect changes that are happening in the market with sustainability, those trends that are coming up, which I'll talk about briefly. It cannot just sit there and it cannot collect dust. And so it's really important that we have this continually improving step in the strategy cycle. And it's really key that we keep this process iterative as well. So once we've published it, we go back and we're doing research. We're then identifying, are these our drivers still? I think compliance is a really good example here. So a new piece of legislation might come out that directly is going to affect us on sustainability, CSRD, for example. And you're then going to say, okay, well, our driver's changing a little bit here. We really need to get on top of this. Make sure that you're following this process round and round, so it's kept up to date. And we are going to, of course, zoom in on these last three steps here, but that continually improving part in particular. But before we do, I want to just explore what we mean by continually improving. So I'd like everyone to go to menti.com. And I've got a couple of questions to ask to begin with. The first one being, what do we mean by continuous improvement? What do you think that is? And if you can kind of put it into one word or a couple of words, that would be ideal. So if everyone wants to just, you can go to www.menti.com and type in the code, which is 51086701. Or as I say, you should be able to put your phone camera, point it at the QR code there, and it should come up. I'm going to just move over to Menti now. And actually, this should be a bigger screen, so that should help. Thank you. Yeah, if you just want to give us a little thumbs up in the bottom right so I can see you arriving, that's great. Thank you for that. Just give people a chance to arrive. Thank you. Great. So I think most of you have been able to access. Is running off. So we'll go to that first question now, which is that what do we mean by continuous improvement? What is it that you think is needed, or what does it mean when we're looking at doing this, especially within the context of sustainability and sustainability strategies? Great, some responses coming in here. Yeah, so it's about the commitment. Whoever did that first comment in there, great job. I've got, plan, do, check, act, which is also key. I'm going to mention some material related to ISO and environmental management systems and things like that, being that it's my background as well. Learning, that's a really, really great one to have there in the middle, because it really is about looking at what you've done, how you've performed, and how you can then improve your performance. And sometimes just accepting, we didn't do this in the best way that we could, but let's learn from it and let's go on. So completely true. And that kind of ties in with that development and progress. Adaptability, really key. We're talking about resilience again there, how important it is to update our sustainability strategy to show us being a resilient organization. Desire to change, yes, we have to be open-minded when we have these sustainability strategies that things are going to change. It's crazy just in the last 2 months with the geopolitical situation, what's happened, and the repercussions of that in sustainability. So it's all really, really key. So thank you very much for that one. Great. Wow, 104 responses. So thank you very much. And I will share these afterwards as well, because some of the questions, it might be quite interesting to have the answers as well. That second one there is, are you continuously improving when it comes to your sustainability strategy? I think this is really interesting. I think ideally we'd all love to say yes, but I'm aware that it may not be as easy as it seems for various reasons. There are so many challenges when we're implementing sustainability strategies. So far, good to see that the majority of people are, and I should have a follow-up question asking what that means to you, but I suppose that's a discussion that could go on forever. But I'll leave it just one more minute. Okay, so it's kind of rounding off. And my last question, perhaps for those who answered no there, or perhaps those who said yes and still feel like they come across any barriers. What's stopping you from doing that continuous improvement piece on sustainability strategies? Also good to cover because I go over the challenges later, but I'd love to be able to kind of incorporate some of this in the next time I do the webinar. So yeah, we've got education, knowledge, sponsorship, time, money, time. It is unfortunately, yeah, team buy-in and resources. So this is great because I'm going to be looking at internal engagement and external engagement as well when it comes to sustainability strategies. What have we got? Lack of resource. Yeah, unfortunately, I think it's all very similar, which is, yeah, lack of time, lack of resource, lack of knowledge. And I get it. It's not easy when you're trying to manage, everything within sustainability. There's so many topics that you have to cover in itself. So thank you very much for completing that. I'm going to go back to the slides now, but we will have some more questions coming up later. So do keep that up. Right, where is my PowerPoint? There we go. So yes, thank you very much. Um, Looking at what we mean when we talk about continuous improvement, I think it seemed like a lot of people had a really, really good idea of what that meant already. I've taken an example here, kind of pulling on my experience with environmental management systems from ISO 14001, in which, when we're talking about continual improvement, we're talking about the process of improving an organization's environmental management system to achieve better environmental performance. And I feel like you could just switch that environmental management system out with sustainability strategies or sustainability in general. So then we have these questions that we're going to ask ourselves. So if we're looking at setting environmental objectives, it's going to be, has our sustainability strategy got robust, smart environmental objectives that allow us to measure progress? Next one there, does our strategy identify our environmental impacts and describe how we will continually address these? Third one, does our strategy identify relevant legislation and update to reflect changes in this? So really, I think this is a good place to start. If you're not too sure, I feel like this list is a really good place to kind of consider within a sustainability strategy context. Okay, have we got these things set up? Are they established? How can we improve on these every time we look at sustainability, our sustainability strategy, and how we want to update that? But why are we doing all this with continual improvement? It seems like a lot of people are, which is really, really great. But for those, who aren't, there is a really, really strong argument for why we need to be doing this. I've touched on that first one already about having a kind of static old strategy. If you're not keeping it up to date, then your clients and your stakeholders, your customers are going to be asking questions. If you are looking at a sustainability strategy from 2000 and you haven't provided any kind of update since then, it's going to raise a lot of questions. What are you doing since then? Is this just greenwashing? Are you just putting this online to say, yeah, we're doing something, but not actually implementing, not really believing in it? So first reason for why, we really should be doing and implementing that final stage with continuous improvement. You've got the costs to non-compliance. So again, we're seeing a lot of legislation that's coming out. And I don't necessarily mean just a financial cost, because it might not have that direct impact on you, but it could be losing out to clients. If you've got one client who is really on with CSRD, for example, it's very relevant, so I'm going to keep mentioning it. And they are doing everything that they need, or ESG reporting, they're really on top of that, then you could potentially lose out to other client to when you're kind of looking at, or when the client's looking at choosing you for a particular project. You've then got the encourage innovation and efficiency improvements over time, which is really, really key as well. Continuous improvement really drives cost reductions in your organization and looking for those opportunities. And I think telematics has been a really great example of this. So we've seen, if your fleet is using a certain amount of fuel, your plant and equipment's using a certain amount of fuel, you can now use telematics to measure why those inefficiencies are occurring, where they're occurring, and then using that data to make it more efficient reduce the consumption of that fuel, reduce your carbon emissions, reduce cost as well. So really, really key. It's going to help you address stakeholder concerns proactively, which is really key. We're not being reactive here. We're being resilient to what's happening in the market. We're planning ahead, and that always looks better than kind of panicking when you have to do something last minute and then unfortunately facing the reputational risk that comes from that. And then again, yeah, it can really help businesses stay ahead of competitors and industry benchmarks. And this is really key. I think when we help and support organizations build a sustainability strategy, one of the things we do is a benchmarking exercise, looking at competitors, looking at clients, what's happening in the market with sustainability and their sustainability strategies. Straight away, if we go on to a website and we find a strategy that's from 2020 or before, that they're not as invested into sustainability, and we're instantly going to mark them down because of that. And you can tell when you go through the strategy itself that the targets aren't reflecting what's actually going on in the market. You can tell the initiatives that they're talking about, they're not robust. They haven't really planned it out. They haven't got the action steps in there. So having a up-to-date strategy can really, really help with that and help us help in general kind of set those benchmarks that are realistic but also ambitious. If we go back to that continuous improvement piece, I think it is really key to just point out how important the targets, goals, indicators, metrics are for allowing you to do that continuous improvement part. Because if you don't start and you don't kind of change your goals or your commitments at any point and update them to reflect again what's going on in the industry, you're going to fall behind. It's really, really vital that you know what your organization is doing and those commitments, and of course basing that on the research that you're doing, and of course once you have them, that you're measuring and managing and reporting on your performance. Just quickly, when we go over this and we talk about objectives, we have this we really want them to be smart, and we really want them to kind of match this checklist that we've put together. So this is something that you can go away and you can think about, okay, when we're looking at our targets now, do they meet these criteria? And of course, there's a real emphasis on this. If we take it back to that definition that I had with the ISO 14001 definition on what continuous improvement is, you can see this setting environmental objectives, and it emphasizes why it's so important. So when we're talking about objectives, they really, really need to be smart. I'm quite sure the majority of you will know what that means, but if you don't, we have some resources available that go kind of into detail with that. But they also need to align with corporate priorities and industry benchmarks. That corporate priorities is really key, because if you can show how it's relevant, you can integrate your strategy more, and integrating that strategy more is hopefully going to get you that buy-in. So really key one there. Set both short-term milestones and long-term aspirations. Also really key. I think a lot of organizations will just go for that long-term one, but you need to show progress for how you're going to reach that. You want to engage stakeholders in goal setting. So back when you're thinking about those targets and those goals, make sure that you are engaging as many of your stakeholders at all. And then you want to regularly review and refine, and that's just part of continuous improvement. So key to get that on done as well. Here's just a really good example of how you can present this. So I've taken this from Morgan Sindall's website, where they have their commitments and their targets. Why is this good? Okay, so for several reasons. I think it's a very clear way of presenting what your targets are that you're trying to achieve. You can see the KPIs here, the total commitment. You can see what I was referring to as that short-term and long-term target. So you can kind of see how they're planning on progressing to that. And you can see the bigger picture where it kind of falls in, what their overall goal is with that. And of course, in addition to this, you have the option on the webpage to kind of explore each of these in a bit more detail. So really great example of how you can clearly communicate what those targets and objectives are. So with that said, I'm going to have a look at some of the emerging trends that are coming out with sustainability strategies and sustainability in general at the minute. Really key to consider how these are going to impact your own sustainability or own sustainability strategy. You may have picked up on a lot of these already. So I've included two kind of levels. I've got one for if you are starting right at the beginning, not too sure where to start. And then I've got another level there, which is kind of, okay, I have a bit more knowledge on this. What do I do next? So starting with the very first trend that we're going to look at, it is digitalization and the use of AI being integrated into sustainability strategies, and in particular with that monitoring stage. So really it's that sustainability reporting. But this is so key and it's changing so quickly. But it is a huge opportunity for organizations to be able to streamline that reporting process and support on their strategies. And we're looking at, yeah, that support when we're collecting data. So you've got different tools. We have the sustainability tool, which is going to help your organization measure and collect that data. But it's also about analyzing that data as well. So we're talking about that telematics piece as well. And both of those can, help enormously. We are going to talk a lot, and we've mentioned it about how we have a shortage of time, a lack of resource. If you can get some money to invest into one of these tools, or there's free tools as well, we have the carbon calculator that's free. If you can invest in some of these tools, it can make the whole process of collecting data a lot easier and allow you to then focus that time on other things when you're building your sustainability strategy. If you have no idea where to start with how you can kind of look at digitalization and AI when you're working with your sustainability strategy, my advice to you would be to kind of have a look at what is out there, what tools exist, and what they can do for you. So I've mentioned there about data collection. If you're using an Excel spreadsheet, that's fine, but there are more efficient ways of doing it. There's also if you are doing it already, there's a couple of things that you can really consider here to make sure you're stepping and kind of really integrating it into your strategy. So are you using AI-powered energy management systems to optimize building performance? Are you implementing smart sensors in your offices, for example, that are going to measure water use, energy use, and then again, telematics for fleet use as well? Because a lot of scope 3 emissions are going to be coming from transport in some form or another. That's a really great way of trying to tackle that one. So AI, huge trend that's coming out in sustainability strategies and sustainability in many different capacities. I've just kind of focused in on one there. You could do a whole webinar on just how AI and digitalization is going to influence sustainability, but just to keep an eye on that one. Second trend, I've mentioned it already, is just about the upcoming regulation that's coming out from different countries, regions. So we've got CSRD. But it's also about ESG reporting requirements, because that is shifting priorities for organizations to social, which is another trend which I'll come to shortly. But really key here is to just make sure that you're following and at least have an awareness of what's going on, because like I mentioned before, it may not impact your organization directly, but it might have this knock-on effect. If your client suddenly has to start reporting because they operate in Europe aligning to the CSRD, they might start asking you questions. They probably will be asking you questions about what you're doing, and it's going to put more pressure on you. So make sure that your sustainability strategy is capturing these updates and acknowledging it almost. You say, we understand what this means for our organization, and although it may not have a direct impact, we are doing X, Y, Z, and almost kind of presenting information in a way that's going to align with that, if you can do that, to then help your clients kind of work out whether it is fitting with what they need. So really, really key thing here, and we're expecting to see so much regulation and kind of legislation coming out. I do a lot with social value. So, the Procurement Act, the new Procurement Act that was delayed, is now it's being rewritten to integrate social value more. So there's all these knock-on effects that are going to happen, and it may not necessarily refer specifically to sustainability or key topics within sustainability like carbon, but it might still impact on that. So just keep an awareness, acknowledge that in your sustainability strategy. And I know it's really difficult to probably keep up with everything that's going on with regulation. Again, we're talking about time and it takes to keep up with everything. There's a couple of bodies here I've just included the links to. I'll provide a couple of more after. to help you keep up to date with what's going on with regulation in the UK with related to sustainability. But there are other things that you can do as well. So you can engage with industry networks and working groups for shared insights. That's a really, really great one. We have the groups within the school. So, for example, Social Value Leadership Group, I'm on the Plant and Equipment Leadership Group, where these new pieces of regulation that are coming out or anything that's kind of going to influence that particular topic are discussed. And we kind of talk about the repercussions of that, put resources together around that. So, really great way of engaging and finding out what's happening. Attend sustainability focused events and webinars just like this, but we have them on when we do them on particular topics. So like social value I just mentioned, we bring up PPN 0620, we bring up the new Procurement Act. So it's a lot more relevant to that topic, but we can still provide those updates. And if you have the resource, work with legal and compliance teams to interpret new regulations, but very much aware that that will depend on your organization and if you have the resource for that. Next trend here, regardless of what Rachel Reeves was saying about the bats and the newts, is the increased integration of biodiversity and nature-based solutions in sustainability strategies. And we have really, really seen this over the last couple of years. Typically, the built environment has historically overlooked this element of biodiversity, but with biodiversity net gain and things like that, we're seeing it grow in traction, and we're seeing more and more sustainability strategies have a section dedicated to talking about this or having their own biodiversity strategy in itself and talking about how they're wanting to provide a net positive impact to biodiversity. A lot of this revolves around nature-based solutions, which are a really great way to kind of integrate it into development. And it can include things like green roofs, it can be sustainable drainage systems, plant walls, for example. But it could be as simple as if you're in an office building, just looking at what you can do. Can you add like a bird box on the outside? You know, can you do you have a piece of grass that you can do something to? Can you put pots there? It's really small things, but it's like there are so many great opportunities that you can do to at least try and increase biodiversity. And again, this is coming up as a really key concern now with major contractors, you know, having to hit biodiversity net gain targets. That's having a knock-on effect. So having this included in some kind of form or acknowledging it is really, really key. If you don't know where to start with biodiversity, really key to understand what your impact on it is to begin with. And then if you are doing it already, a couple of things that you can look at: collaborate with organizations to support scaling up. Really, really key here. There's so many great organizations that exist out there who are going to know the local area maybe that you're working and can support you. Look at your materials, because materials are a huge one when it comes to biodiversity decline. Where are they coming from? What are your suppliers doing around that? And if they're not doing anything, can you work with them on biodiversity? Can you try and upskill them? Can you recommend the resources that I'm going to recommend to you? You know, it's completely fine. But what can you do around that to try and address the challenge as well? Difficult not to mention carbon. This has been probably the key sustainability topic that comes up in sustainability strategies. Do not see that disappearing. It's going to be a huge challenge that keeps coming up over the next 10, 15, 20 years. There is still that focus. Within that, though, we're seeing these three kind of things that I brought in. So there's a greater focus on whole life carbon assessments and circular economy principles. We've got the adoption of science-based targets and net zero roadmaps. And then we've got investing in carbon offsetting and insetting. If we talk about that first one there for a moment, we're talking about providing kind of greater detail on particular products, materials, services that we're using and the carbon impact of that by looking typically at kind of from cradle to grave. So from the extraction of the raw material to the end of life when it's disposed of or reused, etc. So environmental product declarations are becoming huge here. We've done projects recently where there's been a lot of interest in environmental product declarations, you know, asking, have you got one? What are you doing around this for particular materials? And it's going to keep coming up because there's going to want to be more granularity when it comes to the carbon footprint of particular materials or services. So really, really key to try and integrate that or at least consider it. What it means for your organization in a kind of broader sense is how are you adopting those circular economy principles? So Are you looking at opportunities to reuse over recycle? And what can you do around the reuse of certain materials and different examples? How can you donate them maybe to a local community? How can you take resources off clients, etc., and repurpose them in some form? I was last week in Scotland looking at sustainability initiatives on a construction site, and all around the outside, it was wooden fencing. And the site manager told me that, after the project's done, we're going to take that down. We're donating that wood to a local men's health project in the city, and they're repurposing them as flower boxes and selling them. And with that money, it's going to feed into this organization. Really great initiative there. Community element of it as well. There's so many opportunities like this. It's just, again, I recognize that it's hard with the time, but try and think about how you can integrate those circular economy principles into your organization. Next, as well, if you are doing this already, look at, how you can integrate those circular economy principles in the design and procurement stages of your own products and services. There's, can you develop guidance, for example, on low carbon materials? And again, can you work with suppliers? I feel like, again, when we're talking about carbon emissions, so much is in that scope 3, so much is transport, so much is suppliers. Suppliers is huge, to be fair. So it's really how can we support them with all of this? And this is a really great opportunity. Going into science-based targets, what we're seeing is a lot of clients now are asking for any carbon targets that you have to be verified. The Science-Based Targets Initiative is one of the most common organizations that's going to be able to provide that verification. So more and more clients asking for this. Your sustainability strategy, if you have those targets, they need to be verified. Ideally, it's good if they're done by Science-Based Targets Initiative. If you are already aligned to Science-Based Targets Initiative, have you got a carbon reduction plan? That is a requirement for a lot of clients that you have that. And if you do, how clearly have you communicated it? That's another thing to consider. I'll come to that and show you a good example later. But again, have you integrated all of this into your organization? And what I mean by that is, are you training your staff on carbon and incentivizing carbon saving behaviors? Telematics, again, was a really good example of that. Can you say, okay, these 3 pieces of equipment, they're being run really inefficiently. We can see that they're being left idling for really long, extended periods of time. This isn't optimized idling here. This is like actual idling. So how can we incentivize those people who are working those machines to reduce that, and through that, helping like that? Have you got senior leadership to present and discuss on the topic? Because that is so key as well, having that buy-in. And have you embedded it into your policies as well? So procurement is a really good place to start, but do you have like a travel policy, commuting policy where you're talking about that too? If you don't know where to start with Science-Based Targets Initiative, we as a consultancy can support you on doing that. So we help a lot of SMEs who have been asked by clients, where do we start? We've helped larger organizations as well. So if you do want any advice and support on that, just reach out to us. That's my email again in there if you would like help. Next is the investing in carbon insetting, as well as doing the offsetting as well. And when we're talking about insetting, we're talking about focusing on decarbonizing within your company's own value chain. So it's going to be reducing supply chain emissions and improving operational efficiency, investing in low carbon materials, processes, etc. I do not advise just doing one over the other. We are seeing in sustainability strategies that there's a combination of both, and I think that's very wise. If you don't know where to start with this, really key that you understand what carbon offsetting is. There are too many terrible carbon offsetting schemes out there that are sold in a way that makes it look that you're doing the best thing in the world, but actually in reality, it's not. It's having a detrimental impact on the local community or the long-term environment, biodiversity in that area. If you need guidance on how to do carbon offsetting correctly, the Oxford principles of offsetting are a really great place to start. They are quite comprehensive, but it's going to give you that reassurance of what best practice looks like when we're talking about carbon offsetting. So I'd recommend having a look at that. We use at Action Sustainability an organization called the Gold Standard, which is a really good organization where we kind of assess them each year compared to the Oxford offsetting principle. So you can see an example there of how we've kind of taken that and we use that. But yeah, please be careful when you're doing carbon offsetting. Make sure you do your research before you look into that. And then if you are already doing that, look at carbon offset insetting and what you can do around that. And I've got an article in there with just a couple of ideas that you can have a look at. Fifth trend here is on the social side of sustainability. So again, it was traditionally quite overlooked, but it's becoming more and more key. We've got terms like just transition coming in now, where we're actually ensuring that this decarbonisation and making sure that what we're doing sustainably is having a positive impact on communities and people as well. We're also considering things like modern slavery, forced labor, etc. So really, really key to to include this in your sustainability strategy in some form. If you don't know where to start, a couple of topics you can look at there. If you're already on it, have you looked at measuring your social value impact? How are you doing that? There's different tools that exist that help you do that. We have a report, a social value tools report, which can help you and provide guidance on that. But that's really that next step there that you're going to want to do. Just a quick note, because I've mentioned a couple of topics there that are changing. And of course, there are so many changes within each of these sustainability topics. But biodiversity, carbon, and that social side are really, really standing out. If you want to upskill yourself or you want to gain a bit more knowledge on, what's happening in a particular area like compliance legislation, we have these different web pages broken down into each of the topics on the supply chain sustainability school. So this is just a reference that you can use if you're thinking, oh, okay, oh yeah, actually, I don't really know much about supplier diversity. Maybe I should upskill on that. Head over to the web page, resources on there that you can use. And then lastly, just changing expectations. We're seeing that with investors, clients, employees, and the public and media. And the public and media is a really interesting one because of greenwashing and how this is where sometimes if you have that static sustainability strategy, some people are now referring to it as, greenwashing because it just looks like you've pasted it all over your web page. We're doing all this great stuff, but you're not actually doing anything to keep on top of that. Okay, so spoken about the trends, I want to move on now to just kind of go over some of the challenges that are typically arise when you're implementing a sustainability strategy. So I'd like everyone to head back over to menti.com. If you could, I've just got 2 questions to ask you there. So let me just head over and I will go to the next question, which is what challenges are you coming across when you're implementing your sustainability strategy? It is overwhelming. Yeah, it is. Knowing where to start is can be really difficult. Just on that comment, that is where an action plan is so useful because it breaks everything down into tasks, subtasks, sub-subtasks, and then you can allocate people to each of those tasks. So if people are interested in that, I can kind of send out a template of what that would look like. I don't know. You probably can't respond by chat, but if people are interested in that, just put it in Q&A. So if you don't have a strategy, no problem. What I'd advise is that you join us for our beginner session on, how you create develop a sustainability strategy. Hope this hasn't been too overwhelming for you, but yeah, it's probably good to know this stuff as well when you're going into it. So what else have we got? Outsourcing to expert, staff resource, yes, time, cost, data, meaningful progress. It's difficult, yeah. Lack of buy-in from others, that engagement piece, direction, getting supply chain involved. Yeah, that's a really good one as well. It's all well and good saying, okay, do these sessions with your supply chain to try and upskill them, but I know it can be really difficult to get everyone in the same room. So yeah, geopolitics, preach. Okay, let's go to the next one there, which is, do you have any top tips for overcoming any challenges to implementing your sustainability strategy? I think I'm going to cover some of the challenges, like I said, but I will share these afterwards, and I'm hoping that from this you can take something away as well, that you can, for those of you who are feeling a bit stuck, this might provide a bit of inspiration. So just give that, and I'll leave it on this question as well so that people can add to it whilst I'm presenting the next part. But yeah, what do we got here? So it needs a champion. Completely agree. If you can get several champions within different parts of your organization, that's really, really good. Yeah, also key senior leadership team on board. Start small. I like that one. Yes, start small and get buy-in. Yeah, it's that person who said I don't have a strategy. Do not try and do everything at once. Do not try and cover every single sustainability topic. It's going to be too much. You've got to go through that process of prioritizing, and then I'd suggest once you've done that and you've done a year of doing that, explore, okay, biodiversity, explore another couple of themes or topics, etc. Stay positive. Yes, absolutely. Again, it's difficult. Every day you go on the news and it's something pretty awful about the environment. So there's a really good website, which again I can share, which is all about positive environmental news, and that's a good way of starting the day. Think medium to longer term, not always short term. Yes, look at things you already do. Reframe how you approach things. Look through a sustainable. I think this is a really key comment here because I think sustainability is often seen as a cost, but so often it can be used as a way to reduce costs. So example I gave was with telematics. I'll come to one later where I'm talking about, investing in future workforce, things like that. So yeah, really great. Thank you very much for people who completed that. Feel free to keep adding to it because it would be really great to see what you suggest. I'm going to go back to my PowerPoint. So let's talk about some of the challenges. Internal engagement. How do you keep people engaged with your sustainability strategy? Because it can be tough. And it is vital, really vital to get that buy-in from leadership. And of course, dealing with a million things, they don't always have time for it. So where do you start? For me, my recommendation here is really try and understand what language they are speaking. And for a lot of people working in management or leadership, it's going to be cost savings this or helping us win work this. It's going to be like that. And so when I am doing workshops or webinars, for example, with a particular audience that maybe are more managerial or leadership, trying to yeah, alter and adapt it to kind of speak a little bit like more like that is going to help you hopefully get them on your side and get them on your invested into the sustainability strategy. I think nowadays there's so much evidence to suggest that clients are considering it. So if you don't, you are really losing out. You are really losing a competitive advantage. So that's obviously not good. For employees, there's loads of different things that you can do. I won't go through all of these now. But you can have a look at some of the things that can be done. I've talked about the incentivization piece. I've talked about what else have I talked about that action plan and making sure people know what they're doing. I am guilty as probably as much as everyone talking, using jargon when we come to sustainability. So remembering to kind of communicate in terms that people understand. And I'm going to go into a little more detail about this developing tailored training programs because I think this is a really, really key one because it also applies to that communication piece as well. So when we're talking about training with our sustainability strategy and we're talking about communicating what it is, this is really where we have the most opportunity to get that buy-in and engagement from people. So what are the things we can do to kind of improve that? Now, the first thing I've got here is role-specific focus. So like I was just saying, if I know that management team are going to be there, let's try and make it relevant to them. Can we make it relevant to procurement teams, to HR, accounting? What situations can we see that they're going to come across in their day-to-day that are going to be relevant to sustainability? We've got the practical applications, and this is a really great one. It's so fun. It's like, how can we make this session on sustainability interactive? Adding elements of gamification in here is really good. So like, a point here and a point there. If you get a certain point, a certain question right, can you use technology in some way? So an example of, interactivity, gamification technology, Menti is a really good idea, like I've just been using. And if you're doing an hour-long webinar, keeping people engaged for that amount of time can be really difficult. So trying to put it in at strategic points throughout, really good to keep people engaged and hopefully get that buy-in. And also that last one there on relatable and relevant case studies. What I mean by that is if you can share what you've done within your organization on sustainability, it's a really good way of making it personal. Referring back to sustainability objectives, really key to make sure that people understand the bigger picture, why you're doing it, and then collaborating and pulling in guest speakers when you need to. I always think there's some topics like biodiversity where there are so many incredibly passionate people out there who work in that field on a day-to-day basis who you could pull in to talk about it, and you can just feel the passion coming off it. And I really think that helps engage people. So a couple of things there. One thing also to keep in mind when we are doing training and we're communicating the sustainability strategy, really useful and interesting, is that it is pretty much a 50-50 split between people who prefer to do it face to face and people who prefer to do it digital. So keep that in mind. Again, it's not always ideal if you have to do two sessions, but can you try and do one that's, online on a particular topic and then one that's on in person? Can you alternate in some way? Because the second you just do it online, you're going to lose people. People are going to have their emails up in the background, going to be going through all of that. So to keep people engaged is really hard. Face to face is sometimes easier for that. But also I get it that like not everyone is going to take in the information as quickly if it's face to face. So digital can be better, absolutely. It's just about making sure you've got that balance to account for this, because if based on what this is saying is, if you are doing all these training sessions or communicating everything online, perhaps you're not going to get as much engagement. A couple of other things that we think about here when we're doing training and engaging people: know your audience, gone through that. Start with the basics. So yeah, don't go in kind of getting too technical too soon, especially on topics like carbon, where it can very quickly become quite intense. Be creative, mention that. Encourage critical thinking. So really good example here is if you're doing something around a sustainability topic, is implementing a dilemma exercise. So, oh, like Bob's arrived on site. Bob's found that there's Japanese knotweed. It's an invasive species. What does he do? How can we deal with this from a sustainability perspective? If you tie in those dilemmas to your sustainability strategy, our target is to reduce scope 3 carbon emissions from transport. But, the challenge is that people don't want to do this. How can we incentivize this for you? It can be a really great exercise to do and to get a lot of valuable stuff out of. Appeal to a variety of learning styles, focus on learning outcomes, and emphasize the benefits to the individual. All really, really key things. Externally, when we're talking about engagement and kind of communicating what our sustainability strategy is all about, we want to make sure that it's tailored for different stakeholders. And I'll show you some examples of that shortly, of how that can be done quite well. But what I mean is, yeah, you can have this big sustainability report, but make sure you've cut that down into bite-sized chunks as well, so people can read it. Or you're doing short videos, you've got case studies, you've got blogs, you've got different ways. TikTok videos now, it's wild, but yes, that is what's happening. Loads of different ways to communicate it, and that's also connected to this social media campaigns and storytelling to really highlight successes. And then also participation in industry forums, events, and collaborative initiatives, also really, really key for that external engagement piece. Just showing you a couple of examples here that I think, again, are really, really good for presenting sustainability strategies or what your sustainability ambitions are. We've got one from BAM here. First of all, color-wise, it can be as simple as this. It stands out, each of these segments really, but they're also kind of connected. You can see the connection to their wider framework, which is the Sustainability Development Goals. You can see what that topic is, that theme, and how that relates to, their overall sustainability themes. And then you've got a little bit of an explanation of what that means as well. So very simple way of communicating what their sustainability strategy is and getting it across. Another really great example here from Barrett Developments, where you've got it based on the 3 pillars of sustainability, but they've taken that and kind of turned it into what it means for them. Again, color-wise, it's different. It's visually appealing. They've got an explanation of what it means to each of them. So again, another really great example that you can refer to. And this is a roadmap by MJ and Evans, which is really, really great. So this is good, especially when we're talking about carbon, but it can be anything. When we're talking about what you've done, what you want to achieve, and when you need to achieve it by. So you've got, these major dates in here, and they've kind of broken it down into those, what they've achieved and what they haven't achieved. So again, a really great one that you can have a look at. Okay, last one, I think. But yes, it's been mentioned a lot. What do you do when you have limited resources and you have constraints on what you can do because of that? And it's not easy. There is no, unfortunately, quick fix for this. But look at how you can leverage technology to be able to get time back to spend on other tasks. If you have a system that helps collect data, it's saving you time. If you have an API set up, which basically will help you collect the data automatically, it will save even more time. So there's things that you can do around that. Look into it, look how technology can support and help your sustainability strategy and the processes around that go into that. Accessing government incentives, grants, and green finance options. So, for example, we have the Green Levy Fund, apprenticeships, things like that. So, look at what exists out there to be able to help you. There's not a lot. So, actually, I'd say collaborating with industry peers to share best practices and innovations is so great. If you're working in a local area, reach out to the organizations who have knowledge on how to operate in that area and know what the key challenges are, how you can support all of this. If you do that, hopefully it will help you with the work. What's that term? A task shared is a task halved. There we go. So great place to go. Identify low cost, high impact initiatives. And with this, it's also based on that comment that we had talking about, change the perspective a little bit about what you're doing now and how you can tweak it a little bit to make it more sustainable, put that sustainability lens on it. So here, the example I usually talk about is the labor shortage within the built environment. So if you go to your management and you're saying, listen, this is going to impact us. We're not going to be able to get these people working for us. But if we invest into apprenticeships now, and having going out into the community and talking about what we do within our organization, and we're looking and doing internships, graduate schemes, things like this, that could then help us address this labor shortage. That could then help us retain these people into our organization, and address some of these sustainability challenges as well. So trying to do that is really good. And there are resources and case studies on the school that kind of provide a little bit more context around that, but that's another place you can start. But I know it is really hard. We're often having to deal with a million different things within sustainability. It's happening, it's changing so quickly, it's difficult to keep up with everything. So I realize that's quite a lot of content that I've just gone over, but if we kind of just summarize kind of what I've touched on today, we've gone through why it's really important that we do in continuous improvement when we're talking about sustainability strategies and sustainability. We've looked at some of the emerging trends that are coming out there. So as I've said, those are really what I've seen and what we've seen as a team standing out in the sustainability strategies that we do the research on, but also with the clients that we work with. So really key to consider that if you haven't, or if you are, different ways that you can think about it. And if you think that you've done all of those, great job, you're on the right track, keep going. And maybe it will change next time I do this presentation. And then the other one there is just the key challenges and how you can overcome those to implement your sustainability strategy. Not easy. Lastly, just remember when we're talking about sustainability strategies, I said I'd bang on about it, and I really did. Just make sure you update and communicate progress to stakeholders. It doesn't just sit statically on your website. Keep sustainability at the forefront of business decision making. Really, we want to see a sustainability strategy integrated into all these business processes, all these functions, etc. Again, that could be a whole separate webinar, but really, really key that that's done. Celebrate small wins and showcase case studies to maintain enthusiasm. And I think this is so key and such a great way of engaging people, but just when you're working on a project, people can so easily get invested if they see, the challenges that are experienced in a local community, for example, or globally. And I think a lot of the time, like we were saying, it can be very negative when we're talking about climate change and sustainability in general. These case studies generally highlight something really positive, and again, that can really help with enthusiasm and engagement and get people behind your sustainability strategy, because of course, if you don't have that engagement, you're not going to hit those targets, KPIs, because it's going to be everyone that needs to be involved to be able to achieve that. I've spoken a bit about resources that we have. This is specifically for sustainability strategy. So we have a short 5-minute video if you want to find a little bit more out about it. If you want to talk to your suppliers about it, if they haven't got a sustainability strategy, but you're interested in them building one or developing one, I can recommend these resources here. We have e-learning modules. We have one on performance measurement in particular that kind of will go into that target, objective, indicators, metrics in a bit more detail. So would really recommend that you have a look at some of these. And then lastly, that is pretty much it for me. So apologies because I feel like I have just been talking for a really long time and we don't have very long for questions. So I'm going to have a quick look, but last shout out. Yeah, if you have any questions on sustainability strategy or you're interested in any support related to sustainability strategy or just any of the topics, sustainability topics that I've covered, we have specialists in each of those. So please reach out to me directly via my email, which is here, or you have our website where you can explore a little bit more about those topics and who does what. Also have the sustainability strategy and policy webpage there as well if you are interested in finding out a little bit more about that, really. And yeah, I think I've got some resources here. That's sustainability tool. Put in there. I won't touch on it now, but you can have a look at that. And yeah, so I'll go back to that slide there and we will just have, I'll see if I can do a quick question. Let's have a look. What have we got? Q&A. Okay, so some people interested in an example action plan. So, good, and someone recommending it. Thank you. Anything on strategy that you can send across would be greatly appreciated. Please share an example. Okay. Can you say a little bit about carbon climate literacy training for staff? So what I would do for that is we actually have a beginners level carbon webinar that we do that's going to cover everything pretty much on this. So yeah, beginner level. So it's great for like your supply chain, people who have no experience on that. Generally within that, you're covering, we do touch on scopes 1, 2, 3, but it's quite a, it's like an overview of that. Reason being, like, if you do it for your supply chain, important to know how they fit into your sustainability strategy and carbon emissions in itself. But you're looking at that, you're looking at different initiatives that you can implement to reduce carbon emissions in an office. And we're talking quite low-hanging fruit here. So it is things like the smart sensors that I mentioned. As well as that, you are looking at like carbon footprint, what that means, and how an organization can calculate their carbon footprint for the first time. And this is like several different webinars. Like I do a webinar on performance measurement and management that is helping organizations who have never measured their carbon footprint before measure their carbon footprint. So that is, what do we need to know and where do we get it for? How do we know what our electricity consumption is? How do you know what bill do we get that from? What figure do we take? What unit do we need to enter that into, et cetera, et cetera? And we do that with the carbon calculator to then allow an organization to work it out. Unfortunately, I haven't got any more time for questions, but any of those questions that are asked, because I can see there's a couple more in there, I will get back to you via email. But I'd just like to say thank you very much for joining me today. As I say, if you have any questions, please reach out to me on my email address. But have a wonderful afternoon, and I hope to see you again at another one of my webinars. Thank you very much.